Did you know that the magnificent Great Pyramids of Giza were not actually built by the blood, sweat, and tears of brutally beaten slaves? It is a common misconception, a myth taught in schools for decades. The truth is far more intoxicating. Those monumental structures were actually built by slightly tipsy workers who were paid their daily wages in beer. Yes, you heard that right. Human civilization, in all its glory, was not built on a pure, pristine foundation of fresh spring water. It was built on a solid, bubbling foundation of alcohol. Welcome back, my fellow history nerds and language learners, to the BrainBoost English Podcast. I am your host, your guide through the crazy, absurd, and completely nonsensical past. Today, we are putting away the boring history textbooks and pouring ourselves a tall, cold glass of liquid history. We are going to explore the mind-blowing civilization-building history of beer. Before we begin, I want you to pull up a squeaky wooden stool. Get comfortable. Now, I am handing you a long straw made out of a dried reed. You might be wondering, why on earth do I need a straw to drink beer? Well, ancient beer was not the clear, golden, fizzy drink you see in commercials today. It was thick, it was chunky, and it was basically liquid oatmeal floating with leftover grain husks. If you did not use a straw, you would be chewing your drink. Now, close your eyes and imagine you are sitting in a dimly lit mud brick tavern in ancient Mesopotamia. The air is heavy. It smells intensely of roasted barley, sour fermenting yeast, and honestly, a heavy dose of body odor from the local farmers who just finished a grueling day in the sun. It is earthy, it is raw, and it is the birthplace of everything we know. Are you ready? Let us take a giant sip of history. Our story begins a very long time ago. We are talking about 10,000 years ago, during a period called the Neolithic Revolution. Before this time, human beings were basically highly anxious campers. We were hunter-gatherers. We ran around forests, threw sharp sticks at wild animals, gathered berries, and hoped we would not get eaten by a saber-toothed tiger. It was a stressful lifestyle. But then, something monumental happened. We decided to settle down. We invented agriculture. We started planting seeds, specifically cereal grains like wheat and barley. Now, for a long time, historians and scientists assumed that the primary reason early humans settled down and grew grain was to bake bread. Bread is the staff of life, right? It makes sense. But recently, a new and highly controversial theory has emerged. It is called the beer before bread hypothesis. Many archaeologists now believe that our ancestors did not endure the back-breaking labor of farming just to make a sandwich. They did it because they wanted to get a little bit buzzed. They wanted beer. Imagine an ancient farmer leaving a bowl of harvested barley outside. A sudden rainstorm hits, soaking the grain. The farmer forgets about it for a few days. During that time, wild airborne yeast magically drifts into the bowl. The mixture sits under the warm sun and begins to bubble and ferment. The farmer finally remembers the bowl, looks at the cloudy, foaming liquid and thinks, well, I cannot waste good grain. He takes a brave sip. Suddenly, his mind feels wonderfully relaxed. The universe makes a little more sense, and he feels incredibly happy. It was a happy accident, a total game changer. But let us be completely honest here. Ancient people were not brewing beer just to throw wild parties every weekend. Drinking beer was actually a matter of life and death. It was a crucial survival mechanism. Think about the water supply back then. There were no water filtration systems, no chlorine, no fancy reverse osmosis. Drinking water straight from a river or a stream was basically playing Russian roulette with your digestive system. It was a guaranteed ticket to getting terrible, life-threatening diseases like cholera or dysentery. The water was crawling with deadly bacteria from animal and human waste. This is where beer became the ultimate superhero of the ancient world. The process of making beer requires boiling the water in the grain, which instantly kills all the nasty bacteria. Furthermore, the alcohol and the acidity produced during fermentation act as natural preservatives, keeping the liquid safe to drink for a much longer period. Therefore, drinking beer was exponentially safer than drinking water. People of all ages drank it. Men drank it, women drank it, and yes, even young toddlers drank a weak, low-alcohol version of beer. It was the ancient equivalent of drinking bottled water, just with a little extra kick. They called it liquid bread because it was packed with calories, carbohydrates, and essential nutrients. It gave them the energy to farm, to build, and to survive. As human societies grew larger and more complex, so did their relationship with beer. Let us fast forward the timeline and travel west to the sun-baked lands of ancient Egypt. If Mesopotamia discovered beer, ancient Egypt turned it into an absolute empire. In the land of the pharaohs, beer was not just a beverage. It was the backbone of the entire economy. It was literally liquid gold. Ancient Egyptians did not use coins or paper money. They used a barter system, and beer was the standard currency. When you think of the magnificent Great Pyramids of Giza, you probably imagine tens of thousands of slaves whipped and forced to drag massive stone blocks under the scorching desert sun. Hollywood movies have fed us this dramatic image for years, but archaeological discoveries have completely shattered this myth. The pyramids were actually built by highly skilled, respected, and well-fed laborers. And guess what? Their primary form of payment was, you guessed it, beer. Every single day, a pyramid worker would receive a daily ration of about 4 to 5 liters of thick, sweet, nutrient-dense beer. This was not the kind of beer that would make you stumble around and fall over. It was relatively low in alcohol, but incredibly high in calories and vitamins. It was basically an ancient alcoholic sports drink. It hydrated them. It gave them the massive amounts of energy needed to lift heavy stones, and it kept their morale high. You could argue that without this daily supply of beer, the workers would have gone on strike, and the pyramids would have never been built. Beer was so deeply woven into the fabric of Egyptian society that it was consumed by everyone, from the poorest peasant to the wealthiest pharaoh. They even had a goddess of beer named Tenenet, who was believed to watch over the brewers and ensure the quality of the magical liquid. They buried their dead with massive jars of beer so that the deceased would not get thirsty in the afterlife. There is an ancient Egyptian proverb that says, "The mouth of a perfectly happy man is filled with beer." They truly understood the assignment. But history, just like a river, keeps flowing forward. As the great empires of the ancient world eventually crumbled and fell into ruin, the secret of brewing beer did not die with them. It traveled north, crossing the Mediterranean Sea, and entered a dark, misty, and disease-ridden continent known as Europe. And what happened next would change the taste of beer forever. Welcome to the Middle Ages in Europe. The Roman Empire has completely collapsed, and things are looking pretty grim. Cities are crowded, they are dirty, and they are absolutely infested with deadly diseases. The water quality has somehow gotten even worse than it was in ancient times. Rivers and streams are basically open sewers. Drinking water is practically a guaranteed death sentence. So once again, humanity desperately turns to its oldest and most trusted friend, beer. But during this dark and chaotic time, who do you think stepped up to become the absolute master brewers of Europe? Was it wealthy kings? Was it greedy tavern owners? No, it was the monks. Yes, those quiet, incredibly pious men living in isolated stone monasteries, spending their days praying and copying holy books. They became the ultimate beer barons of the medieval world. Monasteries were practically giant brewing factories. They were safe havens for tired travelers and religious pilgrims, and they needed a safe, sanitary beverage to offer their exhausted guests. Because water was so incredibly dangerous, everyone drank beer all the time. Nuns drank it, priests drank it, and yes, even young children had a warm bowl of beer for breakfast. It was simply the safest and most nutritious thing available to consume. Fasting periods during religious holidays were particularly strict back then. Monks were not allowed to eat any solid food for weeks at a time. So, what did they do to survive? They simply brewed an extra strong, incredibly thick beer and called it liquid bread. They drank gallons of this heavy liquid every single day. Technically, they were not eating anything solid, so they were not breaking any religious rules. It was an absolutely brilliant historical loophole. But the medieval monks did something even more important for the history of our favorite beverage. They introduced a magical little green plant called hops. Before hops existed, beer was flavored with all sorts of weird herbs, tree roots, and sometimes even mildly toxic plants. It tasted wildly unpredictable and went bad very quickly. Hops changed everything. They acted as a powerful natural preservative, preventing the beer from spoiling in the barrels. More importantly, hops gave beer that signature crisp, slightly bitter flavor that perfectly balances out the heavy sweetness of the malt. Without those clever medieval monks, we would probably still be drinking weird, sweet herbal root beer today. Before we hit the modern era, we have to talk about a very serious moment in beer history. In the year 1516, the Duke of Bavaria, in modern-day Germany, decided that the brewing industry was getting a little too wild. Brewers were throwing all kinds of crazy things into their vats to save money. We are talking about chimney soot, stinging nettles, and even toxic mushrooms just to make the beer hit harder. People were getting seriously sick. So, the Duke introduced a very famous law called the Reinheitsgebot, or the Beer Purity Law. This extremely strict law stated that beer could only be made from 3 exact ingredients: water, barley, and hops. They did not even know that yeast existed yet, so they just left that part out of the law. This rule is actually the oldest food quality regulation in the entire world. It forced brewers to stop acting like crazy witches mixing poisonous potions and start acting like true professionals. It set the global standard for what real quality beer should taste like. Let us fast forward a few hundred years to the 19th century. The Industrial Revolution is booming across the globe. Steam engines are puffing, factories are roaring, and the world is changing faster than ever before. But for thousands of years, brewing beer was still basically a magical mystery. Brewers knew that if they mixed grain and water and left it alone in a warm room, it would eventually turn into alcohol. But they had absolutely no idea why or how it happened. They literally called the mysterious foaming process "God is good." They honestly thought it was a divine miracle from heaven. Enter a brilliant French scientist named Louis Pasteur. You probably know him for creating pasteurized milk, but his real passion was actually studying beer and wine. By looking closely through his microscope, Pasteur discovered the tiny, invisible heroes responsible for fermentation: yeast. He proved to the world that yeast were actual living microorganisms. They were single-celled fungi that eat sugar and burp out alcohol and carbon dioxide. Suddenly, brewing was no longer a magical guessing game. It was a precise biological science. Brewers could finally control the exact quality and taste of their massive batches. Right around the exact same time, another earth-shattering invention came along to change history: commercial refrigeration. For thousands of years, humans could only successfully brew beer during the cooler winter months of the year. If you tried to brew in the blazing heat of summer, the wild bacteria in the warm air would infect the batch and turn it into disgusting, sour vinegar. People had to dig massive underground caves and fill them with heavy blocks of ice cut from frozen lakes just to keep their precious barrels cold. But with the invention of artificial refrigeration, factories could suddenly mass-produce perfectly cold, crisp beer all year round, regardless of the outside weather. This technological leap completely revolutionized the industry. The thick, chunky, cloudy oatmeal soup of the ancient world was officially gone forever. Through advanced filtration and modern refrigeration, beer transformed into the clear, bubbly golden liquid we recognize today. It shifted from being a necessary daily survival tool to a massive, global, multi-billion-dollar corporate empire. So here we are at the end of our intoxicating journey. We have traveled from the muddy riverbanks of ancient Mesopotamia, where an accidental fermentation saved early humanity from deadly water bacteria. We have marched through the blistering hot deserts of Egypt, where liquid gold paid for the greatest stone wonders of the ancient world. We have sat in the quiet, echoing halls of medieval monasteries, where clever monks found the ultimate religious loophole for fasting and perfected the bitter taste of hops. And finally, we have arrived in the fast-paced modern world of gleaming stainless steel tanks, microscopic science, and ice-cold refrigerators. Beer is not just a fizzy yellow drink that gives you a bad headache on a Sunday morning. It is the invisible golden thread that ties human history together. Think about the massive impact this single beverage has had on human culture. Wars have been temporarily paused for it. Important international treaties have been signed over it. Revolutionary ideas that completely changed the course of nations were born in noisy, dimly lit pubs while people clinked heavy glass mugs together. It is the foundational pillar of modern agriculture. It was the savior of public health before the invention of modern medicine. It was the original currency that built vast empires. And it has always been the ultimate social lubricant, bringing total strangers together to share a warm fire, a drink, and a good story. Next time you open a cold one, whether you are at a noisy backyard barbecue or sitting in a crowded local bar, I want you to completely change your perspective. Do not think of it as just partying or slacking off on the weekend. Hold your glass high and declare proudly to everyone around you, I am not just drinking, I am actively participating in a grand 10,000-year-old tradition of human survival and advanced civilization. I am tasting the very essence of history itself. Thank you so much for joining me on this wild, bubbling ride through the past. If you enjoyed learning English while uncovering the crazy truths of our history, make sure to subscribe and like the BrainBoost English Podcast. Keep your mind sharp, keep your English flowing, and always remember that history is infinitely more fascinating when it is a little bit weird. Until next time, cheers and stay curious.